hosting Trevor Hambayi, who is the Senior Partner at Development Finance Associates. And today, Trevor will be discussing a very important topic that I think is affecting a lot of SMEs. And today's topic of discussion is financial implications and impact on SMEs, COVID-19, and particularly currency depreciation. But before we go further, I would suggest that you mute your mics. For those of you who have your mics on, you're also welcome to turn off your video to make it clearer for you to hear Trevor as he presents. I would also request that if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to post them on the chat section. That is at your top right corner. If you're using a laptop or a computer, you are able to post your questions and Trevor will address them at the end of his session, which will be, we'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A. At this juncture, I'd like to hand it over to Trevor to tell us more about himself and get into the presentation. Trevor?
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. So other than the introduction that Peter has given, the one thing that I always say is that I have been in the SME space myself for quite a long time. So usually when I speak around these issues, I'm speaking from a position of a practical position where I've actually experienced what I'm talking about, and I know exactly what position you are in as an SME. In the previous presentations that we have done around finance and business skills, we have mentioned the issues on external factors within your business. Usually when we discuss these things, we're always looking at the internal factors about what you need to be doing for yourself. But we haven't given as much importance to the external factors. And this is what I really wanted to talk about today in terms of the focus, because the current position that we are in as a country, as well as a business entity, is all due to external factors. And that is where your COVID-19 comes in, as well as currency depreciation. So I really want to zero in on these factors, but we'll also look at the what you should be doing. So the presentation is about 40 minutes. And I have really divided the presentation into 4 different sections, subtitles. And the first one is that we'll look at the link between your business and the economy and how the external factors come into play. The second one is the economy. I really want to look at the historic position of the economy. The historic position of the economy and where we are presently and what the future outlook might look like. And then we'll look at the impact of that external factors to your business from a financial perspective. And then the 4th subtitle will be looking at repositioning yourself and the lessons that we should be learning from the current economic position and what the takeaway is going to be. Just checking that every one of us can actually see the screen and the presentation.
Yes, we can, Trevor.
Okay. So for the next 40 minutes, I just want you to change the way you are thinking about how you look at things. You've always had the issue around thinking outside the box. For the next 40 minutes, I want you to be thinking into the box. What really has happened? You see the girl there who is doing exactly what we've all done. We've all gone into hiding in our houses, and we are peeping outside to see whether the space has changed in terms of COVID. So the general perspective is that if you're thinking into the box, is that on the outside is where the country economy is or the global economy is, and you want to see how you can survive from your small space as an SME business within your box. And that is the paradigm that I really want us to be looking at in terms of seeing what the external forces are going to be doing to you within your space. And basically, I wanted to look at this in terms of the external forces. The If you have ever had to do a business plan for your business, one of the things that you need to be able to have on your business plan is your risk analysis. Your risk analysis, normally, every time I have seen the business plan, especially for SMEs, you have what you call the SWOT, which is which usually looks at the internal issues, which is your strength, your weakness, your opportunity, and the threats. And there's rarely any time that you actually put the external factors in. The external factors, we usually analyze them using PESTEL. Now, PESTEL is just a tool that we use in economics to define the issues that we need to look at in terms of analyzing your business, which basically is an acronym for political issues, the economic issues, the social issues, technological issues, environmental issues, and the legal issues. And you've seen that on the slide there, I have given an indication of what those factors are. The one thing that you do actually find is that most of the things that are in PESTEL are actually interchangeable. That the political issues that you might be saying that speak to policy, trade, and fiscal taxation could also fall into the legal space in terms of tax, trade, and safety. But they all link together, that the political issues will speak to the interest, because the decisions that the policy issues that a country takes will also affect the economic issues. Yesterday, the finance minister was doing a press briefing, and he was talking about issues around having to support the business sector. And they were speaking about policy issues. And one of the policy issues they did is that they're putting resources into the financial institutions to try and support the SMEs. But you find that from an economic perspective, the interest that is going to be charged is also coming from the policy issue. So that is how you link this. So the economic issues covers the interest, the foreign exchange, the cost of your raw materials. The social covers the demographics about where you, what kind of clients you have on the market, the lifestyle, the culture, and the technological issues, obviously, the advancements that are coming into play that you can see now that we are sitting to do this webinar session, and now we are having to depend on technology to do this. So these are the changing things, and the environmental issue is where your COVID-19 is going to fall, the issues around waste management and climate change, and the legal issue is the legality of your business, your compliance with tax, trade. In the last few weeks, we have seen the issue around a certain TV station that is being closed because of tax legal issues. So these are considerations. So you can see that your business will be affected by external factors, even if it does not actually imply on your financial. So this is very important for you to be able to understand. And a lot of times when you do your business plan, I do not see the PESTEL in the analysis of your business. You always see the SWOT. So what I have here is that then you'll be looking at the internal risk. So the PESTEL is looking at all the external risk, and then the internal risk is basically the same thing as the PESTEL, but you look at all the issues from the internal position of the company, which is then your company policies, your financial management, how you're going to manage your finances, your social interactions. The social interaction is the one that they usually speak to, is that if you really are a good business person, make sure that you are interacting with people that are going to bring value to your life. And that's where social interactions are very important. Your technological efficiencies, you need to have the right equipment. That is very unlikely that you'll be able to do business now without a computer, a laptop, or a phone. And those are all technological efficiencies. Then you can go into issues which actually speak to production equipment, which is technologically advanced. The environmental issues, your geographical location about where your business is going to be would determine how well your business might succeed. And obviously there are legal issues within your company. At the moment now, there's a debate around the labor regulation. The new labor law is supposed to come into effect, I think, on the 8th of May, and everybody's saying we all cannot afford to run with this new labor regulation, and especially now with COVID-19, is there a possibility that we can defer this? So that speaks to your internal risk and the considerations that you'll be taking. So the internal risk is basically just the opposite of your PESTEL. It's just that you're looking at the issues from the inside. PESTEL looks at the issues from the outside. And in terms of risk analysis for your business, is that at the end, then you do your SWOT analysis. This one then, for you to determine what strategy your business is going to take, is that you need to determine your strength, see where your weaknesses are, and then determine the opportunities and threats. And that usually determines what direction your company is going to take. So I just wanted every one of us to understand these issues around the risk. This is the link that you have between the economy and your business, because the risks that are in the economy will also affect the risk to your business. Even sometimes we try and ignore this, that you think that you can work in a silo. It is not very possible. As long as you're working in an economy, those factors will come into play, which is the issue around COVID and the depreciation of the kwacha. So I'll speak now to, so we will narrow this down. So let's go to the second one, which is the historic position of the economy, the Zambian economy, as to how we have gotten to where we are and where you will be as a business in this space. So the first thing you must understand with the Zambian economy is that we had our good times, which was between 2004 and 2014. During this time, our economic growth was, the GDP growth was slightly above 6.9%, around 7% on an annual basis for 10 years, which was a very, very good thing, that our GDP quadrupled in that time. It grew from 6 billion to $27 billion. Now, the factors that we're contributing towards this growth was, firstly, the international copper price. Copper price at that time actually reached a peak of above $10,000 per metric ton. So it was very positive for our country that we're producing copper and we're getting very, very high price. And the second one was that in 2008, we reached what was called the HIPC completion point. This was where the country was forgiven its debt by the multilateral lenders. And that time, most of the loans that we had were actually bilateral loans, which were concessional loans. And they were long-term loans for around 30 years with a low interest rate of around 2 to 3%. But we were forgiven the debt, which was $7.2 billion, was reduced to just $900 million. With this reduced our debt servicing liability on an annual basis from $300 million to $51 million a year. So this was also very positive. And at that time, what then happened is that we achieved our highest foreign exchange reserves the country has ever had. We had $3.4 billion in reserves. This is more than 4 months import cover. Where we are at the moment, we've got 1.4 billion in foreign exchange reserves, which is less than 1.5 months of import cover. The other factor that was driving the economic growth at that time was obviously, so the foreign exchange reserves, what that did is that it was able to ensure that we got the kind of foreign exchange in the country that didn't put any pressure on the exchange rate. And that time, the exchange rate was like 1 kwacha to 4 kwacha. So that is what was holding the exchange rate. And then we achieved, at that time, we were also driving economic growth by foreign direct investors. That foreign direct investors were putting in around $1 billion a year into our economy to drive growth, especially around the mines. As well as the increase in construction and retail and wholesale sector. This is when you started to see all these chain stores having to establish themselves within the country. But what this did is that we're generating a lot of revenue, but the revenue was actually going out of the country, and there was no direct benefit to the Zambians in terms of employment creation, as well as poverty reduction. And we also had the bumper harvest during that time that the country was introducing the FISIC program, which is a fertilizer support program. And this was increasing our our reserves in terms of food security. So all these are the factors that were really leading to the economic growth. But one of the factors that I haven't put here that kept all these factors in place was obviously good governance, that the governance in terms of accountability of our resources was very good to be able to maximize the utilization of the resources. So what started to change? In terms of having to change, I know this is starting to sound like an economic class, but I thought it is important that you all understand where the transition was and how we got here before we actually speak to the nitty-gritty of the SMEs themselves. So then what started to change is that the transition started in 2011, between 2011 to 2015. Firstly, the price of copper was dropping between this period by an average of around 18 to 22%. And by the time it got to 2015, the price had dropped to $4,600. And that was unsustainable for the mining houses. And then we had the drought in 2015. And what it did is that it put the country in a power deficit, as well as a reduction in the stockpile of our reserves for the staple food in maize. And this started to increase in terms of price. So the power deficit was also meaning that we started to experience load shedding, which increased the cost of doing business in the country. But the sad thing is that between 2011 and 2015 is a period when the country incurred its highest debt accumulation of any period in its history. So we contracted debt during that period. And by the time we got to 2015, we found ourselves in a position where government didn't have the resources to start paying for debt servicing. And that is when our reserves started to deplete. But also government then started to try and find revenue from other sources. Okay. So in terms of government trying to find revenue from other sources is when you see the issue around the taxes that you are starting to pay from 2015 to 2018. Every time you turn around, there was somebody saying, "Hi, my name is tax. Please give me some money." That we're taxed for everything from airtime, all your road licenses went up, your toll gates, all those things were coming because the government was trying to raise local revenue. But what they also did is that they were also enforcing what they call a monetary policy rate, which required financial institutions to deposit more money as a reserve with the central bank. And for the financial institutions to do this, it meant that they didn't have a lot of money to lend out. So this is what they call the monetary policy rate. And this, what it did was reduce liquidity from the market. Now, they did it for two reasons. One was to obviously reduce the amount in the market so that we are not taking a lot of money that we have to buy dollars to reduce the pressure on the exchange rate. Because then in 2015, our exchange rate, you remember at that time, dropped from around 6 kwacha to 14 kwacha. And this is the government's strategy to reduce it. But the other aspect that we've also had in 2015, government has had a dispute with the mining entities in terms of VAT refunds. And unfortunately, this dispute has been going on since 2015. We still have it today. And this has also restricted the amount that they're getting. So then with the debt position that was increasing and the power deficit, these issues started to drive the economy downwards. So the debt position is, as it stands now, is one of the biggest challenges that this country has in terms of the growth. And it is also one of the things that is affecting your business as an SME. One of the things that you see as an SME in this country, unfortunately, is that whatever business that you're doing, everybody is asking you to supply them goods and services on credit. And this credit line has started all the way from government. So in terms of our debt as a country, we've got external debt. This is the position as it was at the end of December 2019, 4 months ago. The external debt was $11.2 billion. the domestic debt was $5.53 billion. The domestic debt, this is money that government has borrowed through the treasury bills. They issue them out through the central bank, treasury bills and bonds. So that amount is $5.53 billion. And then we've got the arrears. This is money that people have supplied goods and services to government, and government has not paid. And this is $1.8 billion. Yesterday, the minister was announcing that they are putting some money to try and reduce these arrears. The actual amount in kwacha is 26.3 billion kwacha is what it is in arrears. And government now has released or are saying that they're going to release 2.5 billion, which is like less than 10% to try and reduce those arrears and put some liquidity into the market. But what has happened is that one of the things that has changed in the last few years is that a lot of business in this country is government related. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. At some point, there's somebody in your supply chain who's got a connection to a government contract. And if they haven't been paid, it means the whole entire supply chain will be affected by the fact that that payment has not come. And then we get the issue about, I'm just waiting for a payment, then I'll pay you. So this has been a very, very big challenge. And the last time when I speak about financial aspects, I always mention the fact that the biggest challenge that is going, the biggest factor that causes SMEs to fail in this country is that they have supplied goods and services to large organizations and they have not been paid on time. And this trend has started to grow as well with the chain stores, that when you do supply the chain stores, which is ShopRite, Pick and Pay, Cheers, they have got a way of delaying their payment to the extent that it actually affects your operation. Before it was 60 days, now you get up to 90 days and you still haven't been paid. And usually after 6 days, they want to pay you half the amount and say you come a bit later for the payment. And the challenge that we have as a country is that the legal system does not work for us. You cannot sue them, you cannot charge them interest, you just have to wait until they pay you when they want to. And it's a very, very big challenge. So this has been a problem with the debt problem. Now, what this debt position has done for the country is, why is it such a big challenge? Of the $11.2 billion that we owe, $3 billion is Eurobonds. This is commercial debt. This commercial debt is the one we've gotten from the capital market. So this is like going to the bank and borrowing the money. So we have borrowed this from international banks, really. And when we started, we were supposed to have been paying interest rate of around $240 million a year. But the interest has been going up. The interest rate is a floating rate, and it's now gotten to 540 million. But in the last 2 weeks, this interest has gone to 52%. So in essence, we'll be needing to pay $1.5 billion a year in interest for these loans until we start to liquidate them. And then the 8.2 billion of this 8.2 billion, $2 billion is bilateral. This is money that is under the IDA, which is money which we might be able to negotiate with IMF. But the other $6 billion is Chinese, and we really don't know what the interest rate is there or how long they are. But we're looking at paying around $445 million in interest every year. And then we've got the domestic debt, which is at $5.53 billion. That domestic debt, which is treasury bills and bonds, is around 30% in terms of interest now, and it requires us to be paying $1.5 billion a year in interest. When you put all these numbers, it's $2.5 billion, which takes away around 40% of our entire budget. And that is the big challenge. And in terms of our budgets, so we pay 40% to service our loans, but from our budget, we are also paying 51% to cover for salaries alone for the government employees. So that takes away 90% of all our budget, and then it leaves the 10% to work with. And now you have seen that from the Minta's pronouncements, because of COVID, their capacity to be able to generate revenue has reduced by 20%. So even the little 10% that we had that was remaining is gone now, and they still have to borrow to find that money. So that is the big problem that we have as a country. So these are the factors in terms of current economy that I was talking about. But so we've got 51% in government salaries and 40% in debt servicing. So the issues that are going to happen now in terms of the limitations that we have as a country is that we obviously have depleted resources, and we've got a high debt service position both for external and local, which increases the volatility in the exchange rate and will increase capital flight. The price of copper has dropped as well to 4,600 because there's no demand from China. We're still going through the power deficit, and we've got a liquidity crisis that there is no cash in the economy. And then you throw in COVID. The effects of COVID, as we are presently are, have not yet hit our economy. The only aspect that has been affected with COVID are two things. The first one is obviously the exchange rate, that the exchange rate has dropped, but the drop in the exchange rate has not all just been with COVID, but there are all the other factors that I have mentioned. But COVID has obviously contributed, because what it has done is that it has actually strengthened the US dollar because of the actions of China. And that meant that the exchange rate, there was a depreciation in our kwacha. The second aspect is obviously that it has reduced the capacity of government to generate revenue. And what it meant is that they were going to have a budget deficit. And those are the immediate effects of COVID. From a business perspective, as an SME, I'll speak to there. What is your immediate what are the immediate impact to you as a business, and what the future is going to be? And then obviously when there are big considerations because of the political issues around the elections. Okay, so the impact on the country, like I mentioned, are all these ones, which is the loss of revenue. That you find that the first thing that it has done, the COVID has had a very big disruption in terms of the supply and trade chains. So it started with China. When it started, China has become such a big global entity that most of all the countries were actually outsourcing their goods and commodities out of China. Even the United States, for all their labels, their designer clothes, everything, all those things were being manufactured out of China and shipped to the US. And this has affected everyone, which is the same thing, is that even if for us, we've got a lot of things that we import from South Africa, but in true sense, there are a lot of things that South Africa is selling to us which are coming out of China. So everybody has been using China as an outsource production facility because of the low cost that they have. Japan has taken their first step. I think they have put around $600 million to try and move companies out of China in terms of their production, so that if this thing ever happened, we are all not depending on China to be able to determine this, because now China has become the biggest economic power in the world, which is why if China catches a flu, we are all going to get sick, which is why there's been a drop in copper prices, because China is the biggest buyer of the commodity. So there's been reduced international trade in local trade, and you've seen this, that government is not able to raise any money because there is nobody importing anything. Then they're obviously going to have a budget deficit because they don't have the money, and they are going to overrun their budget. You have seen what has happened with the kwacha depreciation, and this is going to increase the inflation within the country, as well as the cost of goods. The cost of goods is really very sad, because immediately the exchange rate drops, that cost of goods increases, and there have been increases of more than 100%. The other day, somebody mentioned to me that 750 mils of cooking oil had moved from 19 kwacha to 44 kwacha, and it just tells you the margins that are there. That is more than 100% in increase. So generally speaking, around the globe and within the country, what we're going to be seeing is a recession. From the minister's presentation yesterday, he mentioned that our economic growth is going to actually shrink by minus 2.6%, which is a lot higher than the regional average, where sub-Saharan Africa is only expected to shrink by 1.6%, whereas the global economy will shrink by -3%. So this is a recession, and most countries have started to put strategies and policies that are trying to support their businesses to help them survive this, because without this, a lot of businesses are going to go into bankruptcy. And these policies are the ones that they are calling stimulus packages, which is government putting resources into the private sector. And there are two ways that you can do this. I'll speak to this, but the volumes that the other countries are putting are astronomical. I mean, the United States is put initially. They started with $2.2 trillion into the economy, and now of that 2.2 trillion, 350 billion was supposed to be going to SMEs. That money has been exhausted, and now they're putting an additional $310 billion. Our local position here is that government is intending, or they are going to release 10 billion kwacha, which is like $500 million, into the financial institutions to support SMEs. But I'll speak around the criteria that they are going to be using and why you shouldn't be getting too excited about this. So in terms of GDP, I've mentioned this. So for you as the SME, the first thing that is going to happen is that you will have to immediately lay off your employees. It is a question of how you want to survive this. If you knew how long the lockdown was going to be, you might say, look, I will keep my employees for this 1 month because I can afford to pay them. But if you do not know, then you are saying, look, I will put you on forced leave without pay until we know what is going to happen, how long this is going to be, and what the dynamics we're going to take after this, which is the first thing. Because of the closure and the lockdown, you will have a loss in revenue for your business. It doesn't matter what business you're doing. That loss of revenue is going to come because a lot of contracts and orders are going to be terminated. Everyone will tell you, can you hold on to this order until we know what direction we're taking, or we are back and forth. So it will give you a liquidity challenge. And the liquidity challenge is on two fronts, from your business perspective and from your personal one. And you need to be able to have taken the right measures or hedge to cover both ends. And then you obviously see the high cost of doing business, which is coming from depreciation of the kwacha. That if you're going to do any business, it's going to be more expensive, which is the same thing. If you've got goods to move, if you want to move goods from here to the copper belt, now has become more expensive to do it because everybody will have a reason as to why it is so expensive to do this. So what I really expect is that there will be a lot of businesses that will not come out of this. A lot of businesses will fail. The limitation has been the fact that as SMEs, we have had a very big challenge in terms of having to grow reserves for our businesses, that from your businesses, you're able to save some money to put away, that if something happened, I can still run my business for another 3 months, even if I'm not making money. This has not been happening. And that is why a lot of businesses are not going to make it through this period. If you're going to borrow any money, you'll find that this money will come at a very, very high interest rate. And those are very clear challenges that you will have an SME. They might be slightly different when you start to speak about specific areas. There are other areas that are obviously affected more than the rest. But on the positive side is that you must appreciate that there is a very big business opportunity here. Most of the from a historic position is that most of the industrial revolutions that have happened on the global scale have all come out of a recession. So the Great Depression of the 1930s, the First World War, the Second World War, were all periods in which afterwards there was an industrial revolution around the globe, and countries were built around this, and that creates a very big business opportunity. What you will find is that a lot of business dynamics will change either within the country or globally. Everything is going to be different. And for most of the entrepreneurs is that you need to find where your space is going to be for you to be able to position yourself to take advantage of those changes. In terms of the change, for you to take advantage of it is that you need to position yourself before we actually get there. If you think that you will change after the COVID, it will be too late because somebody else would have taken that space. So in terms of mitigation, what factors should you do to mitigate your business from this? The first aspect is that you must appreciate that in terms of mitigation for your business is that this should have happened before the shock hit you. What you're looking at is a bike which has got a shock absorber. This is inbuilt. It is already there before the shock comes, so that when the shock hits the bike, it's able to take that external shock. And the simple issue around mitigating yourself against any of these external forces is that you must have had reserves. So as an SME, you should have had savings to be able to cover you through this period. And this is the very big lesson that we must all be learning, that it doesn't matter how your business is performing, you need to still be saving some money, which is the same problem that the country is in. The reason we have not been able to hedge ourselves against the effect of the COVID, as well as the exchange rate depreciation, is that we do not have the reserves. So it's very, very important to ensure that you have got the savings to cover your business. But let me look at the issues as to what you can do now that you have gotten into a position where you have been hit with this and you didn't have the reserves. And one of the factors that that I keep talking about is the power of being prepared. But before I get to this, one of the factors is that if you're not in this position, is the first question you must ask is, what do I need to do in order to cut my cost? Everything else, cut my cost so that I reduce the expenses that I'm going to incur during this period. And the second question you must ask yourself is, do I have enough reserves to be able to survive this period? If I do not have enough reserves to survive this period, is that there's a very good likelihood that my business is going to fail. Now, if you think that you cannot survive this period and you think that your business is going to fail, you need to start taking the necessary measures to cut those losses. That, look, what I want to do is shut down my business, and then I will sit and wait for this period to come and strategize as to what position I want to start with when I am done with the COVID. Those are very, very hard decisions to make, but you must make them. You cannot wait for the force of nature to hit you or force you into a position. You need to make that decision on your own. It is not question. There's no question about the fact that a lot of businesses are going to fail from this because of the fact that our country, in terms of government support, is not there to be able to get us through this period. It has to be a very strong business that is going to survive the 1 month. There are very few that can survive 2 months, and unlikely, even the big ones. Where we stand at the moment, you find even like big companies like in the tourism sector, the hotel chains have closed their doors because of the risk that they're running, that we cannot afford to continue to pay this. And then they're saying, let's close. When this is done, we'll reevaluate our position and see where we're going. And that is very, very important for every one of you to be able to do this, especially with your small business. So in terms of preparedness, is that the key aspect around your business is that you should have prepared, which started with your PESTEL analysis in terms of risk. And I always use this example that if you're going you want to cross the Atlantic Ocean, the type of vessel that you pick to be able to cross tells us how well you are prepared to be able to do this. So what vessel you pick will determine how well the likelihood is that you will cross the Atlantic. So you could decide to go on a boat, on a canoe, you could use a sailboat, you could use a cruise liner, you could So ultimately, if you wanted to say, look, I want to be guaranteed 99%, there's always a 1% that you might get. The 99% that are across the ocean, then I'll go into a submarine. So that determines how well prepared you're going to be. And it's the same principle that we take for our business, that when you do start your business, make sure you are prepared for all the eventualities. The last time I was speaking around PESTEL, which is the risk analysis, I was saying with PESTEL, we must add a U at the end, that we do the PESTEL, and at the end we put the unknown, and that unknown is where COVID is going to be. So one of the principles, I have got these 10 principles that I use for a successful business in terms of an SME. What are the 10 key principles that you must have, which is around financial management? Now, those 10 principles, I'll not run through them, but the first one is basic accounting. You keeping your cost to the minimum. The cost of your goods, don't undercut the price of your goods. Your client management, which is your client is king of the business. Your professional worthiness, your honesty, your courtesy, your time management is, and then number 6 is grow your network. Your network is your net worth, which is really very important as how you're going to use it, which is going to apply right now where we are in this position. Then you need to manage your cash flow, that your debt is your greatest risk, and you separate your personal and your business income. But the 2 ones that I really want to touch are savings, the amount of money that you are saving from your business, from your income, as well as your personal BMS balance. These 2 are the ones that I really want to speak to, which are speaking to us having to manage the situation we are in currently. So the issue around savings is that it's very, very important. Like I mentioned, that the hedge that you are going to have around COVID-19 and this impact that is that you should have had savings to support you. And the savings come in 3 different forms that I normally speak about. So if you're an employee, then you need to have 2 savings, which is your personal savings as well as your retirement benefits that you are saving for your retirement. But if you're a business, then they will become 3, that you've got your personal savings, then you've got your business savings, and then your retirement. So you can determine what percentage you want to put away in savings, depending on what you want to achieve. So if you are running an SME business, is that you're paying yourself a salary. From your salary, you have to put away something for personal savings. What remains with your business must also be taking something away from there to put into your business. The key aspect around savings is that make sure where you're putting the savings, they are also growing. It is not just putting them away in a cookie jar and you expect that they'll be fine. They need to be in an interest earning account, because then you need to take care of the issues around inflation as well as depreciation of the currency. So that is very important. But the percentage that you save is determined by what you really want to achieve. If you've got a target, it makes it so much easier. If you tell yourself that I really want to buy a car at the end of the year, you will save a lot more than if you didn't have that target. So very, very important that you do this. So if you've got savings, and really where you want to get to with your savings is that I want to have at least a minimum of 4 months of savings, of savings that will last me a minimum of 4 months, whether it is a business or it is your personal. So the minimum is 4 months, but ideally it should be 6 months. And that is very, very important. And that is the lesson that we have learned from this COVID, that really whatever I do now is that I need to be able to have savings put away somewhere for an eventuality like this, because you can never tell something like this was ever going to happen. And that is the issue around savings. What I usually do for my personal management in terms of finance is that I have always paid, say, my school fees 2 terms in advance. So any bills that I have paid it 3 months in advance. So what it does is that every time if I do have an issue of financial, I'm looking for finances. I'm not looking for finances for what I need to do today. I'm looking for finances that I might need in 3 months' time. And it gives you time to be able to work on something. The issue where we have always having to say, you are in arrears in terms of your bills, is very, very poor management, and it gives you difficulty in terms of you achieving financial independence. So I think that is a strategy that you must be considering. Okay, so in terms of investment options, this is just a quick bonus of where you might be able to put your investment, which is property rental. Everybody likes to do the property rental, but that market is really slumping because the return is under between 6 and 7%. The rental development is a lot better, where you build a property and sell. There are also the capital markets, which is the stock, the bonds, which is there are also stocks which are on the Lusaka Stock Exchange. They usually have an 18% stock, but the stocks are for long-term investment. They are not short-term. You do this for a long-term investment that you want to invest for 5 years, and then the stock price will increase and you can make capital gains. The bonds, which is your treasury bills, those are between 20 and 30%. They are very good investment instruments at the moment in terms of their return. There are hedge funds which you can do, which are from external hedge funds, where you invest on the outside and the return is in hard currency at 6%. There are term deposits, what you normally call the fixed deposits. These are between 12 and 14%. And equity investment is that you can take a bit of your money and you go invest in somebody else's business, so that when they make money, you're also making money. But make sure the business you're investing in is slightly different to the one that you're doing, because you don't want it to fall at the same time as yours. So I have mentioned the issue around investment. So what you're trying to avoid with your business, which is the same thing as your personal income, is a business which is hand to mouth, because then that is not a business. That is just an extra income stream, and it is not really going to be very helpful, especially at a time like this. And your hedge to this is obviously your savings. But what we do have now in terms of COVID is that it has disrupted the supply chain continentally, regionally. We find that now we can't even import things out of South Africa. There are a lot of countries that also have put in measures where they're saying you cannot buy these products from us because we also need them. It has created consumption variations. We are now having to promote foreign to local. So if you're a producer now, there's an opportunity for you to be able to get onto the market, because people are looking inwards in terms of their products that they're going to be using. There's also going to be a lot of cultural adjustments that you see now, that we have started to having to try and recognize each other, even in masks. The issues around sanitizers, this is not going away anytime soon. We do not know a lot about COVID and how this is spread, and you will find that very soon we will need aerosols to spray our rooms like a target to disinfect it. Industrial door knobs, you find that nobody wants to handle a doorknob. Everybody's trying to open a door with their elbow. So you need electronic ones now, automated ones that will try and open just by standing there. So these are all potential business opportunities that are going to be created. We're going to be looking at the issues around conferencing and public functions. This is going to change completely, and you might be thinking that they need to be able to align themselves, that you have smaller groupings that are of high value. Commodity deliveries, the potential for growth in the export base is that everybody now is trying to order something online. This is also a potential business. But the key aspect for you as an entrepreneur is for you to be able to leverage your networks, to know where you can find the right approaches in terms of having to get past this. You being an individualism is not going to be very helpful. But one of the key things that you'll be able to need to do is to look after yourself. In terms of your body, you need to exercise and eat healthy. You need to exercise and eat healthy, especially these times that we are spending all the time at home, with the very nice words about I'm working remotely. I'm also eating all the time. Make sure that you've got a good balance within your family. You cannot afford not to be happy with your family when you're spending all this time at home. Very, very important. And the third aspect is that you need to connect with your inner being, whatever your spiritual connection is. Make sure that you have that in balance to be able to get this. The degree of positiveness that you have is going to be very important as to how well you get past this. You cannot be depressed about the situation. You need to find the positives and use this time to think about what you want to change for your life. So whatever New Year resolution you had 3 months ago, I'm sure you have thrown those out of the window and you are redefining what resolutions you want to achieve this year. So the takeaway from this presentation is that I was hoping that I was going to do an Oprah on all of you, that everyone gets a burger, but it's not going to happen. So the first thing that you're going to find is that you need to hedge your risk. So if you have got rentals in hard currency, you need to lock in those rentals with forward contracts so that you're not having to be able not to know what you're going to pay at the end of the month. You need to postpone, delay all your payments, whether it is rental or contracts. You need to be able to speak to your suppliers, to your rent, to your debtors that, look, I can't make these payments until after this COVID is done, because you don't know how long this is going to be. If you've got an operation, your business is that you need to shut it down or reduce it to a bare minimum, low number of staff to reduce your costs. The key aspect here is cut your cost. You need to reduce it. So you need to put your staff on leave. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to do this, but it is a decision that you need to take as an entrepreneur. If you've got any debts, you need to renegotiate them. Start to renegotiate them. Don't wait until you default. Whether you are extending the period or the interest premium, whatever you do. So you need to cut your expenses, even for your personal expenses in terms of the food. Only buy the necessities, reduce how much you're eating. You're not working that much anyway, you're staying at home, so you don't need to take a lot of food. If you're going to eat healthy things that will not allow you to be putting on weight, you need to exercise. I cannot overemphasize this. Exercise, eat healthy, and stay happy with your family bonds. But while you're doing this, you must refocus your business strategy for the new order that is coming. That new order will come, and make sure you have put yourself in a position where you can take advantage of this. But leverage your networks, which is the fact that you're actually sitting here to listen to this webinar is a very good start for you, that you're actually leveraging your networks. This is going to be helping. Then find the financing sources, the 10 billion kwacha that the financial institutions have been given. The financial institutions have actually indicated that, yes, they will support SMEs, but the ones that they're really going to support are their clients. So it is the current clients that they have, and they must have a history with you that you have taken a loan and you are up to date until end of December, and the COVID is now affecting you, then we can consider about refinancing you. So it's very unlikely that they're going to be looking at new clients who they say, look, I've just got problems now, unless you've been their clients before. So I wasn't very hopeful for the SMEs. I've heard this before. The central bank has released these funds, the 10 billion, at 12.5% in terms of interest. That is what they're asking. And they are also giving a 1-year moratorium on the funds. So the banks will get this money and they don't have to pay it back to start paying back for another 1 year, which has very, very good benefits that are actually coming to the SMEs. But I'm not sure that these funds will get to the SME in this format, because there's also a challenge regarding the framework under which the financial institutions can give the loans to the SMEs, if they are able to give it. That firstly, they cannot give it at that 12.5%. They'll still go back to their 40% interest rates, because then there's an issue regarding which clients do I determine to give at a discount concession rate and which ones do I give at a commercial rate. So that doesn't change. And then the second aspect is obviously the financial institutions are still applying the same criteria that they've been applying before in terms of requirements, financials, collateral. So those are also going to be a very big challenge. So it's a very difficult space to be in. But ZRA is agreed to give a concession also on penalties and interest for any tax that was due, which is not very good. The tax deferment should have been on the tax that I need to pay as an SME, which is my turnover tax, rather than on the penalties. So on the penalties and interest, the ones who are benefiting are the ones that we are defaulting. whereas the ones that are compliant have got no benefit. So very important that you're able to look at your business specifically and determine what is going to work for you. So in conclusion, I have got two inspirational quotes for you. The first one is from Winston Churchill. Churchill was the British Prime Minister during the Second World War, and he says the positive thinker sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible. And I really am hoping that you as SMEs will be positive thinkers, that yes, we are in the COVID situation, but I am an entrepreneur and I really need to find where the opportunity is for me. And you look at where the invisible is and still find the intangible. The second one is from an author. He is Churchill, and he says, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Trevor. It was an insightful presentation. I'd just like to emphasize and remind people who have joined the webinar and did not register to just drop their emails in the chat so we can send you the presentation and the feedback form to help us get back to you and how we can improve this. And if you've got any questions, once again, you can post them in the chat. So Trevor, we have a question, a few questions actually. The first one from Christoph. So he asks, what is your long-term view of the US dollar? Oil prices are negative at the moment, and it seems there is a lot of pressure on the US economy and the dollar. How will it affect Zambia?
Okay. That paradigm is not very easy, but what you do find with global economies is that they are cyclical. Firstly, with the US dollar, I think it is going to remain very strong because of the strategies that have been taken by China. What did actually happen after the COVID is that the prices on the commodity stocks on the international market dropped. And then the Chinese actually bought a lot of that stock. I think they put around $20 billion into those stocks. And that is what strengthened the US dollar in terms of where it is. That a lot of currencies at the time started to drop, but the US dollar continued gaining its strength. So the key aspect in terms of how it's going to affect Zambia is, firstly, from an internal perspective, is that we will have a very big challenge because of the ability that we have in hard currency. So I expect that the exchange rate for the dollar, for the kwacha, is going to continue depreciating because of the position of the country. And secondly, there's been a global fight around the prices of crude oil. And you heard recently, if you're here from today, they've all been talking about the fact that the price of crude oil is actually negative. If you're in the ES, the suppliers will give you the fuel and pay you to collect it. But unfortunately, that crude oil, which is the Brent oil is in the US, is not the one that we use on the African continent. We buy what is called the crude oil, and that price has not dropped. It's around $28 per metric ton at the moment. It has dropped from where it was from 61 to 28, but we always got issues around how we buy our crude oil in terms of having to get benefits for it. So in essence, the challenge is going to be that all the other countries are putting money into their economies to grow them, but we have not done this, and we are at risk of having to remain behind, and it will take us a lot longer to become competitive on the global market.
All right. The next question is coming from Sulukena. So he asks, when purchasing stock on the Lusaka Stock Exchange, which industries can one consider that are more viable?
You must be able to determine what your portfolio is. It is not about unfortunately, our stock exchange has only got 21 stocks, maybe 23 stocks. So there are not very many stocks that you can actually choose from. But if you're purchasing on the stock exchange, what you really want to do is to have a balance in terms of the industries, that you want to spread your risk among 3 or 4 industries, so that if one of those industries fell, you haven't lost everything that you have invested in. So you cannot just go and buy a stock. If you're going on the stock exchange, just buy one stock, because then you are putting all your eggs in one basket. If that industry fails, you have lost all your money. But you need to spread it among 3 or 4 different industries, which will allow you to be able to get benefits from either of them if the economy is growing. But if it fails, then you're not losing all your money because one industry has failed.
All right. We have one from Melanie. So she asks, are you seeing emerging SME clusters and or support forums bringing SMEs together to partner to sustain, mitigate, and better work emerging opportunities? Any recommendations on who we can talk to about this?
It's been a very big challenge, and I have been working on a program that is looking at this. But the first place which is terms of having to find leverage for the SMEs, is that you need to join a specific association. So whatever industry you are in, you join the association, which is the same thing that you are all getting with you having to come to Bongo Hive. This is where it comes. And I am working with a program that is also both Bongo Hive and other business development service providers, where we're trying to cluster the SMEs in creating a fund that supports them, which is outside the financial institutions, which limits the interest rates that they are going to be paying, that it must be concessional. But there are very few industries. So the first industry that you must start from is obviously the business associations, whether you are with Zaki or Zambia Chamber of Small Business Associations, or if you are in the medical space, or you are a legal entity. So there are all these associations that you can join, and that is the first place that you must start from. From that, then the associations will be able to come together to try and create a platform under which we can support SMEs from that perspective. But it's a very, very big challenge in this country that most of these programs take a long time to put together. But it is something that we are working on.
All right. We had a question from Mukolo, but it's also regarding the crude oil, which I think you've answered. So let me know, Mukolo, if you have another question or if your question was answered. We have one from Angelo. So he asks, what would be your advice to the Zambian government to enhance growth in the SME sector? We still have high tax system and 10 billion incentive not being enough to help grow industries. And we still have to import various products to grow the various industries, such as agriculture and manufacturing industries. So Angela is asking how can we best ask government to support the SMEs? How can government best support SMEs in light, especially that they do not have the funds to give out a bailout like other countries are doing?
There are short-term strategies and long-term strategies. The key aspect, firstly, is that from our long-term strategies, we should have started to be able to create the incentives that support SMEs. The Investment Act, which is from 2008, has been designed to support foreign direct investors without giving any benefits to the local entrepreneurs, which has put them in a position where they are uncompetitive. But as an SME, I can't compete with the foreign entity because of the incentives that the foreign entity has been given. And this has been very important in us having to change the paradigm for SMEs to grow. And this is one of the reasons why you find that local SMEs do not grow, irrespective of how they're doing this. We've all got the one feature that we keep saying, trade kings. It's just the one. We cannot, if we want to develop the country, we need 50 trade kings to grow from the local ones. We cannot base this on just one. So it is very, very important that we do. But so the Investment Act must give incentives to local entities, which is firstly the tax breaks that they've been given, that the SMEs should get the same tax breaks. That can I get 3 years tax break for me to be able to run my business? And the second one is an SME development fund, is that we should have a fund that supports specifically the local SMEs to be able to access this in terms of development, which is concessional. It is not commercial in terms of cost. That is the second one. But we also needed to build the systems that support this, which is associations that need to build support to SMEs from production until we get complete access to market to develop them. So these are basic strategies that we have not yet put in place, and that's where we find that we are all fighting to try and get into the business.
All right. Thank you very much, Trevor. Are there any other questions as we finalize?
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So this 65,000, only 240 are foreign entities, but they contribute 62% to the GDP. So it is very important that we need to change this to be able to accommodate our local SMEs.
Okay, all right. We have one last final question, and I think that we'll wind up after that. It's coming from Chilufia. I am curious about the issue of health and safety measures for employees of SMEs. What measures for protecting worker rights? You suggest a business shutdown due to limitation of running the business. But what happens for those whose businesses would die, and what happens after transition? Without health insurance and welfare protection, what do workers do?
It is a requirement. I think it's a government requirement from the Ministry of Health's directive that all the employees must be in protective gear. These are the standard issues that there are issues around washing your hands, wearing a face mask, keeping a social distance. So this is required by every business entity, that if your business entity is not COVID safe, it shouldn't be open. And I think under the Ministry of Health regulation, they can close you. So all these employees are required, if an employee wants them to continue working for this period, to be provided with the right protective gear. And I think that is an issue that is with the Ministry of Health. It is not even in question. But the first aspect is that if you're a genuine employer, you must have the interest of your staff is health safety. You cannot continue to expect them to work if they are not healthy. And any employer that is got their safety at heart will ensure that they have the right protective gear.
All right. Thank you very much, Trevor. And it has been a pleasure hosting you on the Hive webinars. It has been an interesting and insightful discussion, and I'm sure people who participated have had a great time with you. Anyone else can find you? Are you on Twitter? Are you on Facebook? Do you have a page? I know you're on LinkedIn. I've just shared your link.
Okay. I'm only in LinkedIn. The Facebook is just a personal page, but you can also find some information on Development Finance Associates, and then you can also interact there, and I'll be able to respond. But usually I'm available to discuss with them. I had put the information regarding my contacts, my email, and my mobile numbers if anybody was wanting to speak to me. That information is on the presentation.
All right, thank you very much. So that comes to the end of this day's Hive webinars. You can find them on our Bongo Hive page. We've recorded it. We'll also be able to find previous webinars on the same Bongo Hive page, bongohive.co.zm/webinars. And also look forward to future webinars. If you follow the page on Facebook, on Twitter, it's Bongo Hive, and you'll know what's coming up next. Other than that, thank you very much for your time and for joining us. And we've come to the end of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.